What up, everybody? We are back with the reaction series. It's CJ and I. You love the Ashton Hall one, so we're hitting it. We're hitting it back. This is where we revisit controversial topics at times, or react to things happening in the world, to see if they're science-backed or not, to see what's going on, just in the mind, brain, and body around them. Today, we're talking about minimalism and laying down some science on if it's good for us to be in a minimalistic environment. It's a wild time. I love when you brought this one up. What else we hitting on, CJ?
I think it's mostly just that. So we're gonna kind of break down like what kinds of minimalism we are seeing, but like what we're really trying to hit is this like actually good for you? I pulled this idea from some other creators that like I watch and follow. They're in like more like comedy space, reaction space. So Curtis Connor and Drew Gooden both did videos on like minimalism, or like why is everything getting so boring? Why is it not colorful? And that inspired me. I wanted to take that a step further and go like, yeah, it's boring and it's lame to look at if you're like a cool person, but is it actually healthy? Like, what is any of the science behind that? So that is what we are diving into today. We
Oh, yeah.
hit on this a little bit in our Ashton Hall video as well. We were like, oh my God, like he has no like color in his apartment or clutter or pictures. So this is also like something that we see in content creation, which is kind of the other side of our interests over here. So really good merging for us to study.
I'm here for it. And the basic concept that you're describing is like, if you look behind CJ, like her walls are covered with all sorts of wild things. Like it's a wild time, which
I moved my desk for this video because I have like my stair wall and it's empty because I can't reach it. And I was like, I can't show up to this video boring. I have to show off like.
Yeah, I get it. Now I know but you look at on social media, you watch some of this stuff. What we're talking about is that like sterile environment where it's all blacks and grays and whites and everything is extraordinarily clean cut and everything looks or appears aesthetically perfect in a way. Minimalistic. I mean, I feel like some people call it even futuristic at times. Type of thing. Can you see it in movies at times too? So that's what we're talking about. Just to make that crystal clear, we should put some pictures and images and stuff on the screen too whenever we drop this.
Yeah, whenever we dive in. I wanted to start off with like some quick questions actually. So my first one is like, do you like the minimalist aesthetic? What do you think about it?
It is pleasing to me. I've been in environments where what I really prefer myself, and in some of the research I did around this, some of the psychological benefits of it are the calming of the nervous system. And I have a very chaotic life and do lots of different things, so it can be helpful. But as you can see behind me, I don't have that. I don't create that environment myself necessarily. So when others do, like I've been in past relationships where their apartment is like really clean, really clear cut, and it is kind of like this. But what I liked about theirs was that they had pictures and they had things that made it, that were color, and like it wasn't all or nothing. Like it was clean, and it was like the base layer of it was that minimalistic-ish vibe, but then there were splashes of flavor and splashes of them and their personality, like, and that like middle ground maybe is what I personally like the most.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm clearly like the opposite. Like I love like every inch of my walls covered in something. Like I go home to my parents' house and they've got like modern farmhouse, you know, where it's like, right, like that kind of like HGTV aesthetic going on. And I like my nervous system like crashes out when I go back because I'm like, it's too much like open space. Like everything is so like white and boring. Like it doesn't feel lived in. Like that's weird to me. Which was kind of like the other question I was going to go into is like, what kind of environment did you grow up in? Because I grew up like, I mean, like a lot of different like families and stuff, obviously, but I feel like every house I lived in was always pretty lived in.
Same. I mean, my mom and dad had stuff all over the place, all over the mantle, like pictures, like statue things, like all sorts of stuff, like in the yard, even like out front, like for each holiday we would like decorate stuff, and the house would kind of transform to match that season, if you will. My room was like my personal space. In my personal room, I had some things that I put up, like, again, I'm not a very like harmonious person. There's a spectrum of harmonious versus objective. I'm very much more like, does it serve a purpose and help me in some way? I'm very objective in that way. And so I do put some stuff up, and I have like stuff like a Chiefs thing here. I have a helmet on. Like this is the definition of my aesthetic: is a Chiefs helmet just on a fucking lamp, and I have Vader down there, and it's like, it's probably not
I don't
perfectly.
know if you can see. Yeah, I've got like my sidewalk clothes sign that I stole, my cones, all my like books and action figures are over here.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite that wild growing up necessarily, but there was definitely
Mhm.
stuff all over the place and on the walls and things. So, and I've kind of just
You
made
have
it my
some
own.
sort of like personality showing.
Yeah. 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 100%. It wasn't just some sterile environment.
Yeah, which I feel like that is like a lot more of what we're seeing. So we can get into that. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Beautiful. I'd love to. I'm excited. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with just some of like the pre-science. If you can pull up the link that kind of shows, we were looking at this beforehand, and there is like evidence that the world is like getting grayer. So I want to say that they measured this by like product shots or like different images and then compared it. I do have the source that I'll put all of our sources link in bio that we're working off of.
Is this the image you're talking about here?
It should be
Let
the
me share
Miro
my.
one.
Okay. Yeah. That's this one here. Yeah.
Right. So like we see like when it was like 1800, there was a lot more like browns and yellows when things were like being made in like from wood, obviously. And then once we got the ability to get some color in, like especially there, like the 80s and the early 2000s, you can see a lot more rain. And then as of like late 2000s, 2020, we're slowly kind of diverging back towards the middle. We see a lot more like of that black to white and gray spectrum there.
I mean, one of the things I think about when looking at this, because I'm used to looking at charts and shit like that from like science and things, is that yeah, we can't see 2030 on here. We can't see 2050 on here. Like what looks like a trend right now, like while we're looking at the end of this line, it's cyclical. Like what if it goes back up, like, so some of this stuff to me feels like it's kind of cyclical as well. And that in some of the research I was doing, that was something else that I noticed, is that there are trends and things that shift the way that we like colors and all sorts of stuff, but not every depression or recession equals grayer clothes, and not every renaissance equals more colorful stuff either. So it's not
Right.
as there's not as much causation as it feels like this chart makes it feel like there is. Does that make
I
sense?
don't think that this is like the causation one. We'll get into like that, I think, in a little bit. This is literally just about like design. So like completely separate from like economy or anything like that. This is like just about the way that things are being designed. And so we're seeing like more products in like this kind of muted range, like the things
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I definitely, I mean, look at me. I'm literally wearing grays and blacks. Like, I mean, I guess my mic is colorful, and I do love colors and things. Blue's my favorite color, but yeah, I mean, it's undoubted. I get it, and you put so much research into like movies, technology, fashion, like architecture, that is moving towards this grayness, that it's undeniable. It's undeniable without a link. I thought the other thing was the aging eyes video you had me
Right.
review and look at.
We should open that up and play it. We can fact check it live real quick.
Okay, let me grab the link real quick here.
So basically, overall, there's a couple different reasons for like why we might perceive things to be more minimalist or muted or gray. So we like are seeing like obviously they're manufacturing more products in that range, but there is also evidence that once we get older, like our vision shifts. And so things like aren't going to seem as colorful as when you were 5 years old, for example.
Right. Let's put this on
So
at least 1.5 speed.
we'll do a quick rundown and then react.
Yeah.
I swear this is what life looked like as a kid. What the F happened?
If you feel like the world has gone from 4K to 1080p, maybe on display. After the age of 10, the clear green lens gradually yellows as a result of absorbing UV light to protect the retina at the back of the eye. This increasing yellowness.
That is true. That is something that is actually true. Just we can dive deeper, but that is true.
Dulls the bright color color perception. This, combined with the fact that the number and sensitivity of color detecting cone cells decrease, further affects color contrast. But weirdly enough, maybe the world is just becoming less colorful. Color analysis done by the Science Museum Group suggests that the world is converging into a grayness. Take cars, for example. Compared to the 1980s, where there's an abundance of vibrant, saturated car colors, grayscale now makes up the vast majority of cars, the whites, blacks, and silvers. Same with interior design. Compared to the garish tones of the 70s and 80s, colors with shades of gray and monochromatic aesthetics are now becoming more popular. Plus, with an increasing use of plastic and stainless steel and a decreased use of wood, colors are becoming more diluted and suppressed. Biology explains some of it, but maybe our world is just more boring now.
Yeah, so that's a wild time.
Right.
And a lot of the science that he's talking about is sound. He made cultural things as well, but the one thing that is partially true is the number of cone cells doesn't necessarily, which cone cells are what help you see vision or color in your eyes. There's not a huge significant decline in normal aging or whatever, which a slight decrease in those can affect like contrast sensitivity and like fine color discrimination. So older people might find it a little harder to distinguish between similar hues like blues and purples, for example. But that's just like a part, like decline of cone cell function with we age was a claim he made. And that's partially true, partially not, just to be super specific. But the other ones were cultural and cars and things like that.
Which is like kind of what we're going to be covering mostly from here on out, just in like the general what is getting duller conversation. Yeah, so I wrote down like we can break down like devices, websites, cars are all kind of becoming more minimalist. So we can start with cars because that's where he started. This is something I am like passionate about. I've always loved like cool cars and stuff, but I drive like a boring gray truck. Like, I know in another video, like, they were kind of talking about, like, the Cybertruck in relation to this. And, like, politics aside for a moment, like, I have always thought, like, when I was little and Teslas were, like, just coming out, like, I would never, ever buy one of those because they look so lame. Like, they don't look cool. Like, I grew up playing, like, the Need for Speed games and stuff. I was like, well, if I'm going to spend money and have a nice car, like, I want it to look awesome. I want it to be bright and colorful and, like, really sleek and interesting design. So like, yeah, they had the like environmental purpose, but like I think that was like probably one of the first minimalist things I noticed where I was like, what do you mean that's just like a car?
That's wild. When the Roadster came out, like the first Tesla ever, it was like anything but minimalist. And I was just like, wow, that's so interesting. I feel like it got more minimalist when they went to mass production and it just became like a box. Kind of. I hate how I don't know what model it is, but I also there's a certain model of them that I'm like, oh my gosh, that car looks terrible. Like I wouldn't want that either. But then there's like, maybe it's the Model X. I don't exactly know. Maybe it's the Model X or something that one looks cooler. And it's every one that I see is this vibrant ass blue or this crazy dragon scale thing. I'm like, that is sick. That is cool. I like that. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. The people that wrap them, like that's another conversation. But like as far as the production, like even like the Cybertruck, it's just this like gray box. Like if we're gonna make cool, like it's like something cool and futuristic and like cyberpunk or whatever, like why is it just like pointy gray minimalism?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's simpler and easier. Something else that I saw or read is that sometimes something that's interesting is the environmental impact of some of these things. And so it's simpler and easier to make something that is and better for the environment to make these like less vibrant things or things that can go with anything else. So you don't have to replace them and that they can work with all things or something like that. And so that's an interesting concept I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, I mean, definitely like easier to maintain, and so usage would probably go down. Moving on from that, though, like in the other kind of parts of technology, like devices, I mean, like all phones look the same and they're all pretty like slim and thick. I've got my blue phone, which I do like, and
I've got a blue phone too.
Right. So that one I see it a little bit less other than like maybe like the packaging and stuff where it's kind of this tech aesthetic. What do you make of this? Like you're kind of more into the technology space. Like do you think this is like a minimalist trend or do you think that it's just kind of like technology has always kind of been about like the sleekness?
I do think there is something to that. Like there's something that feels almost sophisticated about something that is so minimalistic and simple in a way. I do think it's interesting. Steve Jobs, like one of the big things that he did when he came back was shoot a shit ton of color into the MacBooks. or into the consoles. So like it's interesting that it's shifted away from that with him being gone, and I just wonder what his thoughts on this would be, on this concept would be overall. But I do personally, I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. I like colors and things like that, but I also do like that futuristic type vibe for some things. It just makes it helps me feel like I'm able to focus. This is a serious thing, and this is like something that I'm like, especially for work tools, especially that allow me to not be distracted with like the colors or whatever and just zone in. So part of me does really like that. I've been known to put stickers and stuff on my stuff at times as well, though, like especially if I have like any type of protector, I'll put stuff on the protector. Where's my iPad? My iPad even had a sticker on it. My iPad's beat up so bad, but there's a little sticker on there, and so I don't mind it personally. I have a blue phone. I like to be able to pick things and things like that. I wish the Mac that I have was able to come in a different color, because I would have gotten a different color, but they only had the gray one that I could get. Like, so it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm very maximalist, so I'm kind of in the same boat with tech where like whatever, because I think it is so customizable and like accessible, like that's something different than like cars. Like you have to repaint it or like totally wrap it. Like that gets expensive if you want to do anything. So I think we are seeing like probably more minimalism there, where like, you know, my laptop is like completely covered in stickers.
Painted.
Like
yeah.
There's not an inch of like extra space, and because it's just like easy to like show personality that way.
There is something about technology too, like not just hardware, but software, where the minimalist vibe, I think, does help, honestly. Like, and not minimalist maybe in like colors and hues and things like that, but in just navigating the damn thing. Like some of these newer AI softwares can be very confusing for people, like, and having something that's super simple, or even we just switched from Mighty Networks to School. Our Balanced Creative Community is in School now and not Mighty Networks. And I, for years, was in Mighty Networks, but it is so chaotic and so confusing. There's so many things and these flashing things and this color here and this post here and this notification there and this messages go here and this community is over here. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And it stressed me out. Like whereas School, you have the main school thing, you have a classroom, you have a calendar, you have a leaderboard, and then a DM thing. Like it's minimalistic, if you will. But to me, like I go into that and I'm not overwhelmed at all. I'm like, oh, okay, this feels better. So there are colors and stuff, and we post GIFs and we post all sorts of fun stuff in there. So it's not like it's like this grayed out like Chrome SpongeBob episode type vibe, but it is the user interface, I feel like, is simplified. Maybe that's a way to describe it.
And I feel like that's a really good transition, actually, because the next kind of point we're talking about is websites, which this is something, like, I started to see it a lot more. I think it was in the Curtis Connor video. He specifically is talking about, like, web design and products and how, like, a lot of companies have, like, the exact same product shots of, like, it's a very, like, bland background. It's very, like, aesthetic looking. And, like, no shade to the brands that we have on the Decision Lab, but I have to look at their websites a lot. And now that that's been brought up, I'm like, I can't unsee that. It's all the exact same product shot. So like, yeah, the web design is like great and easy to use, but it's also almost always so bland, which I wanted to ask you about actually, because I know like you design like our websites and like Wix and stuff. I think your website is pretty like colorful though. It's easy to get around. But I want to ask like, what are your thoughts? Like, because we work for like other clients, like are you feeling this pressure to kind of meet that aesthetic?
I do see some of that stuff. I think some of that, if I had to guess, might be that there are things that work, like Six. We work with Six, and they have a marketing agency that helps them or whatever. And that marketing agency knows the things that work or whatever. And so any company that they help is going to have a similar vibe. Six has tons of colors, and I love their colors and all that kind of stuff. But the pictures and like some of that aesthetic stuff, I feel like there are agencies and companies that are helping some of these brands, and the brands are following them because that agency is like, well, this works. And so they have similar product shots because that product shot has been shown to work. And so they just do that over and over and over again. And they have a minimalistic background because that's the simplest one for that marketing agency to get back to them. It is interesting now, which I know this is a touch controversial, but you can upload a product now to ChatGPT and ask it, have this background. Shift the angle of it this way. And so I just wonder if, because now it is so incredibly simple to add more color and contrast and cool stuff with products and things, barring the controversy of using AI tools, but we know it will happen. People will start using these. I wonder if there's new product shots, new pictures, new images, new things that start to get used because it's easier now, and companies don't just have to use the same brand or the same company or the agency.
I don't know. That's interesting. I feel like my prediction would actually go the other way, right? Because I looked at some of this and tried to figure out like what companies are using AI for like my like master's thesis or whatever. And like I think because everything is so replicatable that like sort of can cut out like the middleman. Like you don't have to photograph this a certain way or whatever. Like it's been done so many times that you can probably just use like a conglomeration of your other ads and create something that looks exactly the same, but it's slightly different with even more ease. So it's just, getting things out faster.
That's so wild because just me having a creative mind, I think of it in the perspective, like you've got to take creative bets. Like if you're just constantly taking all that you've always done or all that everyone has ever done and just regurgitating or puking something out that is close to it, you're not taking any creative bet. And to me, it's a way to A/B test and test creative bets faster.
Yeah.
That's the way my brain thinks about it personally. I'm not saying everyone does, and I think that is something that could, if people thought about it that way more, they could take bigger creative bets. They could try different things faster. That would add color back.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, like, I do think, like, I know we brought up earlier, like, this minimalist aesthetic, I do think has been kind of growing for some time and starting to, like, pop off, like, especially, like, design and things like that, which I think this is maybe, like, a good kind of middle ground here is the other place in technology where we see minimalism a lot is, like, TikTok and Reels.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Which
dude.
I'm sure we would love to get into because, like, that's what we do.
Yeah, we are those people, and Flash Cube and where we shoot is anything but minimalistic. It's wild, and I love that aspect. Something that I was thinking about in relation to this, the second that you mentioned that a lot of TikTok influencers, Instagram influencers have these aesthetically things, is the concept of like there are private jets in LA that are hollowed out private jets that don't fly at all, and it's literally just a set for people to rent and go shoot content in, so that they have private jet content. And so what got me thinking, I was like, okay, if there are private jets they've hollowed out to do that, there are probably apartments that are totally for influencers to rent. And I would imagine that those would be like out of a magazine type things that are just these bland things that you can rent and go shoot content in, and it looks a certain way. And so I just wonder how much of the stuff that we see, and then that's amplified, right? We see more of it necessarily. That doesn't, two things. It could be something that's renting and that's skewing it. And then the second thing is we're seeing that's 1%, maybe less than 1% of all humans. Like if they're buying a rented apartment that hasn't been lived in, of course it looks bland. But if they were actually filming in their actual apartment, and like if we actually took a survey if we asked everyone to take a 360 picture or video of them in their apartment across the entire world, I wonder what percent would be completely bland versus have stuff on the walls. If it was like their real, authentic, lived in apartment.
Like with that, like the point of just kind of like influencers maybe being able to rent things like that in like Airbnbs, do you think it's like trying to shoot upwards in like status? Because I do think it's typically like probably more like wealthy people that try to do this. Like the thing that came to mind immediately, which maybe we should pull this up as an example, was Kim Kardashian's house. Have you seen it?
Oh yeah. Like the water,
nothing.
Yeah.
So like I think that is like definitely an interesting shift. Something that I was thinking about just in regards to architecture, we'll get to in a second, is like when we were growing up, like there was like MTV Cribs. And like they rented those. Like most of the time the people that were on Cribs didn't own them. They were just using them for the show or whatever. But like there was all kinds of stuff in there. So I was like, oh my God, if I like can ever afford that, like absolutely I want to have like suits of armor and a pool table and stuff. And now it's definitely trended the other way to like a lot of the celebrity homes we see are like mega organized, nothing in them, minimalist, at most maybe like one piece of art.
There's I forgot the guy's name, Caleb Simpson. I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff, but he goes and literally just tours apartments or whatever for like a literal living and asks people if they'd be willing to let him go into their apartment. And it's crazy, the stuff that you see inside of these apartments. It's nothing like the minimalistic
like the New York
thing.
Apartments and stuff.
Yeah, New York apartment. He just goes in and asks people off the street, can you show me your apartment? And it's crazy. Like they're anything but minimalistic. And so are they doing this stuff for status? 100%. I saw this guy the other day. He's like, dude, it's kind of sad that I have some of the most fire and I feel this too, but he was talking about this. I have the most fire piece of advice or something. If someone actually listened to, it would change their entire life if they listened to that. And I get 1,000 views, 500 views. Then I post a video of me going on a helicopter tour with some attractive girl, 20,000 views, 30,000 views. Mm-hmm. Literally nothing to it other than the fact that the perception and what it's doing to the primal brain is completely different. And it's kind of sad, and it makes me sad to think about because I feel similar at times. Like I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, and I don't want to fall into that trap at times, which with you as a brand director, I doubt I ever will, CJ, but it's absolutely something I think people do for views and get more views, because we're taught as creators what gets you more views, what gets you more followers, what gets you more engagement, what gets you more retention. You've got to repeat. You've got to do again. You've got to A/B test. Oh, that one didn't work. Okay, well, fuck the great advice and let's do the aesthetically pleasing thing or whatever. And it's just like, it sucks. It sucks. Like, I am a creator. I get it. Like, it sucks.
Back end on some of that, like, do you think that it like pops off so well because like it's just this like wealthy aesthetic, or do you think there is like an element of like I want to be that or to get there? Because this is something interesting, like especially with like the Ashton Hall video, just because we've already reacted to that, so it's an easy thing to reference. Like most of the comments were roasting him, and we're like, why? I don't want to do this stuff. Like, where is everything? So which one do you think it is? Do you think it's algorithm or do you think it's people?
I personally think it's both. I mean, I think algorithmically, whether or not, because the algorithm it's not as simplistic as it seems, I feel like. Because even if people hate it, the algorithm could push it because it's getting engagement. Like they're commenting. Even if they hate it, they're commenting. And so algorithmically, I think it may be getting pushed for the wrong reason necessarily. But then it is still something that's primed, because something you see more in your brain, I forgot the exact bias. I think it's recency bias, or I can't exactly remember the bias. But if you see it more, you believe it more. And so this concept of we're seeing all these aesthetically minimalistic, like bleached backgrounds because we're seeing it more. And we could only be seeing it more because people hate it. But our brain doesn't necessarily know that as we're scrolling through. It just sees it more often. So it's like, oh, more people must like this. This must be normal. And it sways us that way, even though we're not clicking every single video and seeing the comments say, oh, I hate this. But that could be the case. It's a mindfuck.
Dude, I feel like that's definitely like what happened to like my family is a really good anecdote here on like I said, I grew up in like a very lived in house. We had things like everywhere, but I think I mentioned like it was HGTV. I can't remember like what their like company is, but it's like Chip and Joanna Gaines who like kind of popularized like the modern farmhouse thing. And my mom used to watch their show all the time. And then they like HGTV started putting on more shows like that where it's this like farmhouse aesthetic, more houses are getting built like that. So when they built their new house, they built it in that like exact style, and so now it's like wiped.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely that like exposure has an impact.
Dude, people don't realize it, how much exposure in like your environment shifts your feelings, thoughts, actions, behaviors, beliefs. It's fucking powerful. So
I feel like just like kind of talking about influencers and like what we see like on the small screen is a good movement to talk about what we're seeing on the big screen. Which is obviously like a passion of mine. And so I had to bring it into this video on how like even movies are getting less colorful. And there's like a couple different reasons for this. What did you see Wicked in theaters?
Yeah,
or
I did.
At all? Yeah. Like one of the first things I noticed, I was like, the color grading on this looks crazy. Like, why is it all kind of like beiged out? There's like, she is green. Glinda's dressed in all pink. Like, why is it so muted? Especially because like it's such a big deal in The Wizard of Oz that it's like a Technicolor movie, right?
Yeah, that's wild. I didn't.
First.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the tulip field and how insanely colorful that felt to me. So I don't know. I don't have as deep an expertise in the movies and stuff as you. Color grading is not something I would see a video and be like, oh, the color grading on that.
Just like
it's not my bag.
Right? Like if I compare like Wicked, which again, like we already are familiar with the world, right? We know the Wizard of Oz. We know how bright and colorful that is. I think of it kind of in the same concept as like the Barbie movie, which like I wrote a paper about. Whereas like you're familiar with the world of Barbie, right? So when you see it on screen and you see like it's so bright, like, oh, that matches like your expectation. Like that's awesome. Everything is blown out. Like they spent so much money on the color pink here. But yeah, it was bad enough to where like the director of Wicked was trying to defend like the grading. Like so many people noticed that it's just muted. Another
Wow.
thing that was brought up in the Drew Gooden video that I didn't even know about was when you're like watching movies at home, a lot of TVs have like an AI built into them that is motion smoothing, where it's trying to predict the next thing that happens on screen to make it smoother. So like this is good for video games, right, where you need like a frame rate. Really bad for movies when it was shot like an intentional way and that it's messing with some of the colors and muting things to make it easier to predict. So we're seeing those problems in both places. Have you ever noticed that? Like,
Damn.
again, I know this
I
is
mean,
my wheelhouse.
weirdly enough, I notice it most in audio more than anything. Like, and I've heard these concepts in relation to audio, but the color stuff I have not. I knew there were settings that you could change what the contrast and colors and like how it looks and stuff. It make it look better at night, make it look better in direct sunlight, like things like that. But I have not necessarily noticed it off the top of my head, to be honest, personally. But again, this is your expertise, so I mean, I'm not surprised.
I think the last note that I had on this was just like something interesting that like color sells really, really well. Like the Barbie movie made like so much money because of all like the brand collabs they were able to do, right? Like that marketing went crazy because they had the specific color pink. The other thing was like Brat Summer from last year. Like that was mostly based around a color and it sells really well. So like I don't know why we're seeing this. All right, but we can move on to our last little.
Real quick, something that I noticed in relation to movies, though, is because I'm watching Guardians of the Galaxy right now, James Gunn, and so many colors. It's so bright. Like there's Thor Ragnarok, so many colors, so many different things going on. The other thing I noticed as well, because you know me, I'm a Superman fanboy. The new Superman that's coming out, the Man of Steel, the original one with Henry Cavill, love that guy. That Superman costume was. It was so obvious what you're describing. It was darker. It was like less color. It was less vibrant. It wasn't like bright red. It was more like, I don't know. It was more kind of like the darker red color of your shirt. Whereas the new Superman, bright as shit red, bright as shit blue, the super green of the Green Lantern, like I don't know, man. So that's something I noticed.
Superheroes is definitely like a good place to see this. Like, yeah, I agree. Like, especially, like, you can tell easily, like, which movies are, like, adapted from comic books. Like, I think about, like, the Suicide Squad movie. Like, that is so crazy. Or Birds of Prey. Like, that's a really good one. I know you've seen that one. Like, where there's, like, pops everywhere, and it's so bright. But, yeah, I agree with you, where, like, they try to get those moody scenes. And I don't have a, like, problem with some of that. Like, the first Twilight movie has this like blue filter over it, so everything's kind of the same color, right? But it's interesting. It is color.
Yeah, it's fair.
It's doing something.
Like it.
It's not just like washing it out. All right, our last two little like points on like where we're seeing this was architecture and fashion.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I thought this was interesting.
Something I actually see a lot of like controversy on, you know, on TikTok, everyone is going to fight all the time over everything, is talking about like Europeans versus Americans, talking about like American architecture and how like it's definitely different because we don't have like a super long history compared to the rest of the world. So we don't have as many of these interesting pieces. It's a lot more based around like skyscrapers and city buildings or things like that, or also like the meme kind of like American small town and you can take a picture of anywhere and it all looks exactly the same. Have you even noticed that? Like as far as here? I think I see it in KC definitely.
It's interesting. I just went to Chroma House, which is here in Kansas City, and it's literally every single room is a different color and there's all this crazy furniture and stuff like that. And then I'm at Plexpot a lot, and Plexpot is wild too. So
I agree with
that's
that.
A lot of the stuff I see
on the inside, but I do think like our skyline is really ugly. And like I think this last cube does fit into this, at least on the outside, of like you have this like kind of bricked river market and it's these older buildings and it's really beautiful, and then like right next door it's just this like metal cube that doesn't really fit anything. Or same thing with power and light, like too light right there, and it doesn't really go with anything. There's nothing like super interesting. It's all just sort of like the same like windowed skyscraper copy pasted.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. I mean, that's easier to make and cheaper probably for the builders. So that's one thing. As far as our skyline is concerned, I doubt that they were like specifically thinking about that. It is pretty when they light it all up. Like I really do
Yeah,
like our
we do have
skyline in
that.
Bartle Hall and like the Opera House and all that stuff is really, I think, unique in our skyline and different. But I can see what you're saying, especially newer developments. There's
Right.
copy and
Which I think
paste
is
type
like
stuff.
also just because we're like a newer country. 'Cause I remember Chloe like went to Colombia and was showing us pictures and stuff. She posted a lot on her like Instagram. Go check it out. Um, but like one of the things she brought up was like looking over. She was kind of up on a hill, like over the whole city. Like everything is a different color. It's all
Yeah.
like very bright, and like I know
Hmm.
that's a cultural thing as well. Like South America is just more colorful and brighter and kind of prioritizes that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's older, much older
And
as well.
then
So they,
I think the last bit of America, if you will click on the link in this, is how it's actually getting worse. We used to have a little bit more personality, but even that is getting kind of washed out. And I think that is,
which link are you talking about?
I'm talking about the one that shows McDonald's then versus now,
Got you. Yeah, let's take a look real quick.
where the McDonald's of our youth was very bright, interesting, had a like play place. You could hang out there. And all the fast food restaurants have kind of moved towards this trying to look more high end. Like everything looks like a Chipotle now. Like it's
Yeah.
all trying to look more high end and it's not as like fun.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. It's interesting you say that because it's, again, in business and content creation, in a lot of stuff, like you do what works and you do what, like, makes money and you do what people enjoy. And I think it's funny you mentioned Chipotle specifically because you go into a Chipotle and you like, is it fast food or is it not? You know, I feel like that's an age old
Right.
question. Like, is it or is it not? It's fresh. It looks sleek as shit. It doesn't look like this random ass like, you know, thing. So is it? Is it fast food or like who like, and that question is just inherent in the way that it's built. And it's like, oh, you're going to McDonald's, I'm going to Chipotle. You know, like, so
Right.
it's interesting you mentioned Chipotle specifically and that they're trying to mirror that a little bit because you're right, they are.
Yeah.
It feels like.
I at least like in my opinion, I mean, this is like all a marketing thing, right? And maybe kind of an economics thing, but like at least growing up, like McDonald's, in my opinion, used to be like really marketed at kids or you like having kids. And so it's like that's why it's super bright. You know, I know they still do like the toy collaborations and stuff like that, but like the play places and things like that, like you were supposed to hang out there with your kids. And now it's, I mean, definitely trying to like market itself upward, which is like, it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And then, I mean, I think so there is something to be said for like, I don't want to pay Chipotle prices for McDonald's, which so it's also getting pricier kind of with this shift upwards. And then also, I mean, I think it's easy to say like with architecture and this specifically, like these buildings are just cheaper to maintain. You don't have to paint over the red, you know, like
Yeah.
you don't have to make sure it stays looking bright and shiny because that's part of your aesthetic. It can like keep getting duller and it'll look basically the same with these like darker tones.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting. I guess you can hide some of the griminess ish if it's not as bright because it's tarnished if it's bright and you have to work more to maintain that.
Right, that it doesn't look as like used. Something I was thinking about because I know they like just repainted a bunch of stuff at like our Worlds of Fun,
Oh,
which
damn,
like
I
I'm
didn't
glad
even
they did.
notice that.
It looks awesome. Yeah, Mamba's bright green now.
Oh, good. I'm glad. That's cool.
But yeah, like obviously like some of that stuff is hard to maintain and you have to redo it every couple of years or it's gonna lose its luster. So it's just easier to be like, oh, we're a higher end restaurant and everything looks like this and it's just like wash your hands of it.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that.
Okay, the last little bit that is a good segue into like the health conversation to wrap everything up was fashion. Um, this was another like inspiration for the script. One, because the Met Gala just happened, which like I care about because I follow fashion a little bit. And two, like I was watching a video on TikTok about this girl kind of breaking down how like fashion is getting a little bit more boring and conservative. I mean, especially like online, that's where we see a lot of these things. But where I think this is true, like I see a movement, you know, in a way towards this kind of like trad wife aesthetic on like people like The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives trending, or Nara Smith, like they're all very like muted, like conservatively dressed. What do you make of this? I don't know that I see it a lot. I definitely see it online. In person, I'm 50-50 on this, but
That's the hardest part for me, or the thing that I think about all the time, is people make general claims about a super specific group necessarily, or sweeping claims about a trend or an overall trend, talking about a super specific celebrities, which is less than 1% of the population, or the trad wives, which is also less than 1% of the total population. And so I just can't help myself but think about statistics and like think about like, is what this TikTok person's talking about the Met Gala, and fashion is completely changing. It's like, okay, fashion in America with less than 1% of the celebrities, and like during a Met Gala, and one specific kind of fashion, and at a certain socioeconomic level. And it's just like, when you zone into what she's really saying, it's like, okay, well, maybe for that one super specific, but that doesn't mean for the other 99% of America or the world that is true. So, and that's true for any kind of social media stuff.
Kind of like 50-50 on this, because like obviously there is like evidence for like Stanford has done, like, I think I'll link that in bio too, research on like how like economics, or how you see yourself, like obviously greatly impacts your fashion. I think fashion industry is interesting because the fashion industry itself is always kind of exclusionary, right? Things have to work their way down for a while before you'll see it in real life. Like that's just how because like you have to wait for something to go out of trend for kind of like the higher ups, and then it becomes more accessible, or we'll get like the duped version, right? So like again, I've seen this a little bit in real life. I think the other thing is like I am obviously a little bit younger, and I also hang out with a lot of queer people who are not known for their like boring fashion taste. Right? Like there's like
That's true.
club culture and drag culture and all of these things that are like very bright and colorful. So I do think we'll see it more, kind of like, how we see like with boomers, right? I think probably we'll cycle around back to that.
Dude, that's the thing that in the research I was doing is the biggest thing, especially for fashion. It is cyclical. So we're making claims about something that is naturally cyclical. Like I mentioned earlier, like there have been recessionary periods where colorful stuff was more a thing. There have been depression or sad. There have been recessionary or like depression like periods where it was more gray and minimalistic. Why is that? There's tons of reasons. Like it could be it's psychologically comforting to have something that's more simple. It could be literally that's all they can afford and all they can make stuff with. Like so,
that
some
is
of these
like
broad
more
claims
of like
are.
Like working thesis, which again, like it's just hard to study like the fashion industry, especially because I don't know that it's studied in a traditional sense. It's studied by people who study fashion, which is fine. Obviously, if that's what you know about, work that. I think like the other piece here is like the economy is also cyclical, and so that might be kind of where we're seeing like some of this. So there might be a correlation, it might be causation, it might not be, but I do agree like these things kind of like move in tandem together. And so we'll see how it goes. We'll see if this like trend kind of persists. I think we have definitely two really opposite ends of the spectrum right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I
like
agree with that.
Celebrities. We see like some of them are moving like a little bit more conservative, like Lana Del Rey has gotten a little bit more chill, whereas then you'll have like Chapel Roan from Missouri represent like very bright, colorful, like that's the whole thing. So we're gonna now break down like what is the science of this? Is this even good for us? We've gotten into it a little bit. We've dropped hints, but now that we've let all of our thoughts and opinions be known, what's the science?
There's tons. In the research I was doing for this, there's all sorts of interesting science, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's actually happening. Directionally, the trend is real. Like there is like this grayscaling phenomenon that's kind of going down, this minimalistic piece that's like in the picture we showed earlier, that is directionally a thing. It is absolutely amplified by social media and some of these like these different platforms and media that we are consuming and things like that. There's lots of different thoughts on why it's happening. Some people consider the world is, they call it millennial gray is something that I saw. And the world is chaotic right now for us Gen Z and millennials. So having a simple, like aesthetic, calm environment has been shown to be helpful. And I also mentioned the sustainability. Neutrals and things that are like play well with grays, whites, blacks, and things like that pass with any trend. So you don't have to replace them or paint your walls all that often, which is better for the environment. It's kind of interesting. It's also, in my research, I noticed that that aesthetic is supposedly more gender neutral as well. So it's supposedly more inclusive. And that is maybe something that could be looked at as like a blank canvas for self-expression eventually, and nothing that is like being given to somebody. Something that I found as well. So it's interesting. And there is a humongous effect of the biggest thing that I saw in research on why this is going on and what's going on here is social media influencers are powerful, powerful, powerful forces for everything we just talked about. Fashion, home decor, movies, everything. In the research I was looking at, nearly 60% of people, of buyers, and 75% of millennials acknowledge that influencers affect their choices, their feelings, their thoughts, their actions, what they buy, what they do. And so I think we are literally at the very, very beginning of understanding how that will affect our psyche and how it changes mass human behavior. And brands know this. Brands recognize this, is what we talked about in the Decision Lab. Like, brands know this, so they use those influencers to get you to do what they want. And they tailor their stuff to make it appealing to influencers so that influencers can influence. And it's just like this giant fucking cyclical circle that causes all of these things to kind of happen. Those are some of the things, the patterns I saw.
We can definitely agree that this is happening. I think the other thing, like, I just wanted to touch on real quick is, like, we have to use influencers sort of broadly. Like, again, like, I brought up Kim Kardashian earlier, who, like, obviously has a lot of hold and power over, like, women. Or also the other one is, like, Cristiano Ronaldo's house kind of falls in the same thing.
Dude.
Whereas, like, right, like, he has a huge impact on, like, men, and that's, like, even a little bit more global, right? Because we've obviously focused on America. That's where we're from. That's where it's kind of easy to see this trend. A lot of influencers are American. We do, for better or for worse, kind of run TikTok and Instagram. But, like, that's where he's, like, an international star, and, like, him and his wife's home is it's so bland. I do think the gender neutral point is interesting, though, and I could see that although it does kind of feel like, oh, well, like, if we can't agree on something, we'll just put nothing in there.
Right. So I thought that was an interesting one. So it's definitely a thing that it could be kind of going on. And I think there's some interesting things. You put some interesting stuff in here about ADHD, and we talked a little bit about, like, color psychology and, like, how that can affect your mood, your mental state, like
Yeah,
essentially whether or not, like, this is good or bad, if you will.
Let's go, like, a smidgen deeper into that. We'll wrap it up with, like, just the deep dive on the science. Let's start with color psychology. Like, brief overview, what is it and how can it affect us?
Yeah, it's really just studying how different hues, different colors can have different emotional and, like, physiological effects on our bodies. So, like, in our brains and our minds, like, warm colors like reds, oranges, yellows are stimulating and energy and passion, optimism, but it can also, which is interesting, it's a spectrum, it can also stimulate anger and aggression and anxiety if it's overused. Colors like blues and cooler colors, greens, are calming in their tranquility and neutral, or nature and renewal, which can be great. It can be shown, blue light has been shown to increase alertness, which is something that is straight in the way that your brain, or your eyes, which are part of your brain, processes this color. A lack of different color stimulation, like heavily grayscale spaces, could contribute to feelings of monogamy, or, like, monotony, depressed moods for some occupants and things like that. Context is the most important thing, and the impact of color can change depending on its application, right? So red could be for romance, red could be for danger. So context, as always, is super, super important as well. And color psychology just looks at how these things affect our brains and which ones work for what. Like, there's a reason why caution signs are bright yellow. There's a reason why yield signs and stop signs are bright red. Like these things have indicated specific things to us all through evolution, because animals and blood is if it's your own blood, that could be bad, right? And so you can think about these things. The sun is bright, what color? Yellow. And that was something that dictated evolutionarily our entire lives, morning, noon, and night. Like so color psychology is really, really interesting, and how it just kind of indicates how the colors do more for us than we think. We'll get into it here in a second, but especially greens and green spaces. But
yeah, with like the transition, there is something that was noted. We'll move into, like, the ADHD portion now, which I just thought was, like, super interesting. It's always something Chloe talks a lot about, and so I've, like, been getting more on my feed and studying a little bit more of this work of this guy, Colin Ellard, though, who he studies kind of the merging of architecture and psychology, which is just a super interesting field to get into anyway.
Damn.
But he was breaking down that, like, architecture, or this is like interior design specifically, that physicians have linked environmental deprivation to ADHD in children. So, like kids need things like toys and artwork around them to stimulate them, or else like they may be more likely to exhibit some ADHD symptoms. And I know we'll get into like babies in a second because that's a huge thing everyone wants to talk about. But like, what do you make of this bit, like the ADHD symptoms by not having a stimulating enough environment?
So this is something that actually is a great moment for science communication, because the research, this concept of environmental deprivation in relation to environment, like what's around them, it did not study toys and art and things like that. It studied green spaces specifically, is what they were looking at and what the claims were in the primary source. What the other environment that they talked about was institutionalization and neglect. So when kids are put into these bland homes or houses or these homeless things or whatever, the effect that can have. Environment is what they're talking about, and the people they're around, the environments they're in, not just what if there are toys around and art and things like that. And that's more what the primary research was like looking at. So it's something just super interesting to look at. That being said, in research around babies and things like that. So ADHD is one thing. Green spaces definitely help. Being in an environment where you're not neglected and institutionalized and can actually form a healthy attachment with your primary caregivers is good. I can't believe. Surprise, surprise.
Point on this before we move into like babies, because I mean this is something that I was thinking about, is like I wonder if like, and I didn't get a chance to like see exactly how he conducted his research, but I almost wonder if like screens are like a factor here. Because a lot of things like the parents go back and forth on is like you need to let kids be bored to an extent. Like if you have a kid like left in a room with like a toy dinosaur versus like an iPhone, like if they only have a dinosaur, like they're gonna have to make something up. They are going to have to be creative. They're gonna have to find something to do to entertain themselves, instead of just like immediate dopamine hits. So that's something I would have liked to see more of, because I think there's something to be said for maybe an environment that's not super overstimulating, but gives them something to work with, like imaginatively. I would like to see more research on that. But yeah, I think screens probably almost definitely are playing a role.
100%. That's a great point.
That.
Yeah, dude, we're 100%. That's a great point. I completely agree. Definitely need to look at that more. And that's absolutely something. There are times where I didn't have a phone, and me and Josh, my brother, had to just make shit up and just play and just use our imagination and stuff. So The Anxious Generation is a great book on this concept, actually. There used to be more, I can't remember if he called it open-ended play, or I can't remember the type of play it is, but we're doing statistically far less of this type of imaginative play where you're out and about and you're roughhousing and you're jumping around and you're making things up and you're whatever. That was kind of more of maybe a masculine vibe. You don't have to be doing that necessarily. It could be any type of imaginative play.
I think
we're doing less of it.
Like me and most of the girls I grew up with, like we had like running storylines with like our like dolls and stuff, right? Like there you go, it was a full drama show going on.
Right, and that's different than just getting on your phone, like you're saying, and just scroliosis.
Right, because I think that's, I mean, obviously contributing to a rise in ADHD symptoms. A lot of teachers are speaking out about this. I'm like, I can't keep kids focused in classrooms anymore. They don't know how to be bored and like occupy themselves. Right. Anyway, so now we can move on to babies, because I think like one of the main things like people hear actually when they hear about minimalism is like concern for children. Like I was talking to my girlfriend about this.
You should be concerned.
Yeah, she's like, one of the first things I think of is like that like babies need a super stimulating environment or they can't develop right. So like let's break down the science on this. Is this true or false? Myth or fact? Is this really bad for babies if they are in just a beige, aesthetically pleasing nursery?
It is true. Visual stimulation is crucial for their development. Their vision, our vision, we were all babies once, develops rapidly in your first year. We're naturally drawn to high contrast patterns, bright colors, different shapes. It's how we learn to focus, track movement, develop hand-eye coordination. So playing with colorful toys, looking at pictures books, like all of these different things are super, super important for our cognitive development. And when that's not there, you're in these colorless environments, you have less time to practice these skills. You have less visual input, which your brain needs exposure to this stuff. Newborns generally, we initially see in black, white, and gray. I don't know if people knew that. And so our ability to perceive color is something that's trained and built in, and detail increases rapidly, but we're born that way. It's kind of weird. And so it very much benefits from visual stimuli. So sure, short periods, like again, context is important. Short periods in calm, neutral environments can be super helpful, but consistently bland and grayscale surroundings just are not going to provide the visual stimulation you need for the development of your eyes and colors and patterns and hand-eye and all these different things. It's crazy that we're doing this. It's nuts.
I know we didn't like really include this as like part of our research, but now that we are talking about screens, like, and what you know about the brain, let's just like hypothesize real quick, because it's obviously also trying to be giving kids some sort of like screen stimulus younger and younger. Is this like meeting the same needs visually? Like we know like it can cause imaginative issues and like dopamine hits, but like if kids aren't quite to that stage yet and they're still seeing like Cocomelon, for example, it does have all of these colors and things like that. What's your prediction? Is that the same? Is that worse?
For some of the things that we're talking about in like hand-eye coordination and tracking movements, the problem with that is, I like my thing. The problem with that is I'm this. What am I tracking? I'm not tracking anything. I'm just looking at it, you know? Whereas when you're playing catch, you're tracking the ball. When you're moving different objects, when you're doing a puzzle, when you're playing with little NASCARs, you're doing the doll thing that you were talking about, things are moving. You're learning how that works and things like that, and how the colors are connected to them. Do the shows like you're describing absolutely hack the brain that is searching for some of the colors and some of that stuff? 100%. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing necessarily, but again, too much of anything is bad, but it's just not, it's not the same thing as getting out into the world and environment and seeing a green tree. And the other thing too is the zoomed in, our vision is changing. Our vision is getting worse, younger, because we are so like this, right? We're so zoned into these little tiny screens. It's so crazy because I have my phone here, I have a computer here, I have a bigger screen behind me, a TV right here, and then I have this giant picture window that I sit in front of to make sure that I can get and like look out as far into the distance, because I can see worlds of fun from here, which is, for people who aren't in Kansas City, is so far away from downtown, the middle of downtown. I can see like the Mamba like on the horizon or whatever, and getting my eye to look that far away is not something that we're doing as much anymore, especially kids, because they're freaking phones. Even on road trips, you got a phone, or you're watching Netflix, or you're watching, like, you're not looking out into the distance and seeing the environment and stuff. So it is not the same thing. I need to look at the research more and get primary resources and stuff,
right.
But come on, like, that's just not the same.
I think at least what you're saying, like, surely about like movement tracking, like that makes sense. That feels like an obvious one. Like, yes, it's nice to have the research to back it up on, but like I definitely see where you're coming from, like heavily with that on if I can only focus on this area versus like I literally need to stimulate myself, so I'm looking like all the points, which is also good for your nervous system, right? So
yeah, it is. And movement too, those neuromuscular junctions and like building that kinesthetic movement. That's what makes us so powerful. Like, the crazy thing about AIs is that an AI could beat us at chess, but you know what they can't do? Stand up out of the chair and walk across the room. You know, like, people forget that these super complex things are what AI is really, really good at, but that's not what makes us human. It's these really, 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 really simple things. Being able to reach across my desk, know where in space to grab my water bottle is and how to close my hand around it and grab. You know how crazily complex and hard that super simple thing is? It's fucking insane. And that's what makes us like human and differentiates us a lot. It's not these complex tasks. And those are the things, that little tiny things, that going outside and playing instead of watching someone play on their phone is vastly, vastly different in relation to movement.
Yeah, so I think that was like most of what we had as far as breaking everything down in the science. So we will wrap it up with our like big question of the episode, which is, do you like the minimalist aesthetic, and would you use it in your house?
Yeah, I mean, I think I answered it at the beginning that I'm like somewhere in the middle. I like a semi-minimalistic type vibe, and then spurts and splashes of color all over the place. Like back here, I literally have the Last Supper, but if you look at it, it's basketball players. Michael Jordan's in the middle, Kobe Bryant there, Shaq's in there, like famous basketball players, and it's like the Last Supper, but it's all these crazy colors and things. Like I showed you my little I showed you my thing. So I like splashing in pieces of color and things, but having a generally minimalistic, clean feeling does appease me.
Yeah, and I think as we mentioned, like I'm the opposite. I really don't like the minimalist aesthetic. I think it kind of is just like devoid of like personality. Like I like walking into somebody's house and seeing like what's important to them and things like that. Um, and then for myself, like I like just clutter. I like when things feel lived in. Like to me, like that is like cozy, and it's like, oh, there's like people around, or like this space is like safe because it is lived in so much. Whereas I get so much anxiety in those like big empty spaces where it's like it just feels like so bland, and like anything could be coming out of anywhere and you don't know who's in and out. Like I don't know, something about it feels that way to my nervous system. So I
I
will
get that.
stay away from minimalism, which I don't have a problem with. Like all my walls are covered, and my partner, she is the same way. So
Yeah,
different aesthetics,
yeah.
both very maximalist.
I love that. I do feel you that you feel better in an environment like that. I can agree with that. Cool. Well, if we have some more spicy episodes lined up, I think we've got some fun ones. We've got a couple that are challenging us to come out right now because they are like, oh, don't post it yet, but we will persist for you, our beautiful viewers. We love y'all. So
that is
stay tuned for those.
Next thing, reaction video, which should come out soon. I've been working hard scripting, is the roast of Luke Belmar. I spent a long time deep diving on his content yesterday. Interesting. I saw him, another YouTuber, like do a combo video of him and Ashton Hall. So like, I was like, oh, we should go into this. But he identifies as a biohacker, so something to be said there. So that is upcoming probably next week. So stay tuned for that. I can't wait.
Oh boy, okay. I can't wait for that. Remember guys, question everything. Thanks so much for jumping in. Have an awesome one.
Bye.